We'll now move on to the next part of our agenda, which is on the in the space of what corporations are doing in philanthropy, and specifically turning it to the Indian context. And so the question that I'll pose here is corporate social responsibly? And to help answer that question, we have two people, two very good friends of Indiaspora and two experts in the space to have a fireside chat. I'd like to invite up to the stage Rick Rossow, who is the Wadhwani Chair of U.S.-India Policy Studies at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And with him, joining him will be Mike McCabe, who is the director, the resident director, North America for Tata Sons.
And where are the matches at? So we can get this fire going up here? No matches?
We got the fireplace.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for that, Sanjeev. And I have terrible news for everybody in the room. This conference is irrelevant. If you're not aware, India has been officially graduated to middle income status. So everybody's wealthy, things are going great, and philanthropy is no longer needed. But let's just dial back and pretend it still was. For those of us that have, obviously if we think of the commercial hubs and capitals and you think of the great things that are happening in Bombay and Bangalore and, some of the rising emerging corners, but then you spend a bit of time in Patna or Bhubaneswar or Agartala, where I was recently. Obviously, there's a lot of swaths of India that aren't getting hit by that. It sounds like, again, with $1,600 per capita income that it's kind of hit a level, but we know the hard reality. Those with the good education and technical skills can move into a really globally competitive part of the economy that may not be accessible to everybody quite yet. It's not the case for the majority of India's citizens. The government does what it can. A lot of great folks, and we know them, that work for the federal government, work for state governments. They're trying to do things to deliver better health care, to deliver better education, but there's going to be gaps. And in fact, sometimes there's going to be political realities that force governments away from taking decisions that might be able to bring development a little bit faster. So there's a crucial role that NGOs, international organizations, foundations, companies, individuals, there's a crucial role that so many others can play, working by themselves, working collectively to try to improve the lives of so many Indian citizens. India itself is, the government's taking a bit more of an aggressive approach in some ways too, with the new mandate that was adopted, a soft mandate, 6 years ago, where companies were supposed to give 2% of their pre-tax profits for corporate social responsibility. Now that's being tightened up, but also broadened a little bit to fall more in line with India's development goals. So interesting things happening. Mike, it's been a real pleasure knowing you for these many years. For those that haven't had a chance to meet Mike, he's been with Tata Group for many years, going back to his days heading communications in North America for TCS. Then now taking over Tata Sons' entire government affairs based here in Washington, D.C. And the thing I really love about Mike, too, that despite being here in Washington, whenever you see him at a reception or a happy hour, he's the least swampish guy that you're going to see there. Talking with Mike, you get a real sense, too, about most of the country, too, is not reflected by what you see always in Washington, D.C. So Mike has remained an incredibly grounded person, and I'm pleased to be sharing the stage with you here, Mike. So first, let me start off. Even as you and I were preparing for this, as somebody that's worked with and around Tata for many years, you've got so many different companies under the Tata umbrella and the Tata Trust. I wonder if you can begin by just giving a bit of flavor in terms of how all this sort of works together. So many pieces, so many companies, so many interests, so many commitments. How does the whole thing kind of fit together in your view?
Rick, it's great to be up here with you, and thank you, Indiaspora, MR, Sanjeev, Gabrielle. That is the billion-dollar question, isn't it, right? Or the $100 billion question. So as you pointed out, I've been in the Tata world for over 14 years, most of that with TCS, all of that here in the US. Obviously, I've spent a lot of time in India, both with the Tatas and previously as well. But it is a big behemoth. It is a conglomerate. It's a confederation. What I can say is that my new job, which I started 4 months ago, is heading up Tata Sons North America. So Tata Sons is the holding company of all the Tata Group companies. They own the largest shares of all the Tata Group companies. And then you mentioned Tata Trust. Tata Trust is a separate legal entity in India that holds 66% ownership of Tata Sons. So we fund them to do all the great work that they do, but in terms of their agenda and the work that they decide to initiate and fund and grant, it's all on their own.
It seems sometimes, anytime I meet with folks that are doing good work on social responsibility, it seems that there's always at least a thread and sometimes a pretty heavy rope tied to some operation that Tata or the trust is doing. I mean, when you think about the range of activities you're involved in, how do you break down, how Tata looks at corporate social responsibility, the types of needs that India has? Is there a few thrust areas, or whatever you see that looks important, you're ready to jump on either the company, the trust? How do you figure out how to prioritize? Because there's so many issues that you could work on.
Yeah, there are. And there are so many issues that our companies are working on. I think the development or the announcement of the SDGs several years ago, the 17 of them, and then all the sub ones under that, was actually a great platform for us to look across all of our companies. And we did an analysis of all the work that they're doing in CSR and sustainability and the environment, both in India and globally. And we realized that collectively we're working in areas across all 17 SDGs. And it gave us a good kind of common language to look at all these different areas and measure ourselves against it. I mean, SDGs are commitments that countries make, but every entity within a country, whether it's a company or a nonprofit or whomever or an individual, contributes to whether the countries meet their goals or not. Yeah. So we're working across a lot of areas. I can say that my time obviously has been spent most with TCS, so I can speak more to that. And a big area that they focus on, both in India and the US, the UK, and actually around the world, because they are very global, is around education and ensuring that the students of today have the skills that they need for the jobs of tomorrow. And that is not only good for TCS as a company, but that's good for countries, for economies, for societies. And they've invested heavily in it. They've gone all in on that.
Yeah. So you said that, is that across Tata Sons too, and the group companies, education the main focus here in the United States? Are there other areas that, that you've seen so far that have been really sort of prioritized?
Yeah, well, in India, there are a whole host of things. So some of the more industrial companies like Tata Power, Tata Steel, Tata Motors, and some others have done a lot on reducing their impact on the environment, bringing down their carbon emissions. A lot of work of late in water, and clean water, and all of that. And obviously, the Prime Minister has announced a lot of initiatives in that area. And then upliftment, as we call it, and others call it, but working with remote societies and villages. In fact, earlier today, it was great to meet some of the partners of some of our companies that work with them back in India. AIF was telling me about the work that they're doing with Tata Steel and some of the villages that they're working in. And then I heard Vision Spring was talking about the work that they're doing with Tata Tea. So again, I'm 4 months in, but there's I can't think of an area, a broad area of CSR or social issues that one of our companies isn't working on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've got, you mentioned the SDGs, but let's take a look at that. You've got so many competing interests and players that are influential, in terms of looking and regulating your company. You've got the international community setting the SDGs. You've got the national government in India, the national government of the United States, you've got state governments, and then you've got the things that your company sees as kind of interests. When you prioritize, I mean, how do you balance all these competing interests, the global community, the governments in which you exist, the things that you see yourself? How do you balance so many different voices there, trying to say this is the most important thing? You got broad coverage, of course, but is that the answer? You do a bit in everything and everybody gets pleased, or do you find some ways to mix and match prioritization between the different interest groups?
Yeah, I personally think that it goes back to the founder of the Tata Group. 150 years ago, last year, we celebrated the anniversary. Sorry you didn't get a piece of the cake. But the founding father of Tata Group had a commitment that the most important part of the work that he wanted to do was the community that he was doing it in. And that if the community isn't healthy, then the company can't be healthy and society can't be healthy. And so I think much of the work of all the companies, again, it's more of a confederation than coming down from on high, is done to impact the local communities where they have their operations. Mm-hmm. And I know that's definitely true with companies like TCS and Power and Steel and others.
Yeah. It's a funny thing. As part of the CSR mandate that was introduced in the Companies Act, there's a line in there that got kind of ignored, that companies are supposed to spend that money in areas where they have operations, which is kind of a weird thing because, of course, a lot of operations are in the wealthier parts of the country. The parts that have the biggest need sometimes are the parts that aren't there. So this new committee report that's talking about some amendments to the CSR law actually has tried to widen that a little bit. So, it's great to do things where you're at, of course, to care and feed for folks that are nearby, but also make sure the other corners. We got about 5 minutes left. I got one more question for you, and then I'm going to throw it open in case we have a couple from the audience. Knowledge sharing, and actually this might be a great entree to folks here in the audience. You are involved in so many of these different things. The Tata companies, the Tata Trust have such a great handle and great expertise. A lot of what we're talking about today is partnership and knowledge sharing. How is it that organizations in this room, of course, many would love to get funded, but aside from that, partnership opportunities to tap into the knowledge base you've got there, what are ways that other organizations should think about engaging, or practical experiences that you've got where you've engaged with other organizations? How do you share this incredible bedrock of knowledge that you've managed to build up?
Yeah, so again, I can't really speak for the Tata Trust, but there is someone here who I was happy enough to meet with, who is with the trust. They do have grants, so you can look at that. But
I'm going to go check my email real quick.
There you go.
Yeah.
But again, leaning back on my TCS experience. So TCS, as I said, does a lot in skill development in the U.S., but around the world as well. And they are a technology company. And through their kind of STEM education initiatives, in my knowledge in the U.S., they do a lot of work partnering with local organizations and nonprofits, whether it's Girls and Boys Clubs, Boy Scouts of America, United Way, you name it. Whoever has the reach into the target audience that they're trying to reach. So that's one thing. The other thing is again, TCS. They have a partnership that launched last year, I think, with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is called Digital Empowers. Again, leaning on the technology expertise of TCS and many of their tech partners and corporate partners, they are bringing together nonprofits, NGOs, academia, to look at how to leverage technology to address social challenges both here and around the world. And I would definitely encourage you to check that out.
Well, we got time real quick for just one or two questions. So we'll take them one or two together if we can, if people have them. I see a couple. Nishant, yeah, good, Mega. So let's get Nishant and then Mega in the table just in front. We'll take them both at the same time, and then you can pick and choose. Yeah.
Thank you, Rick. Hi, Michael. I know you said you can't answer for Tata Trust. We work with 3 Tata Group companies, and it's probably the most enriching CSR partnerships that we have across all our corporate partnerships. So thank you for that. My question is for Tata Trust, and you said there's someone in the room who can probably
I don't know where
answer.
she's sitting.
It's interesting. On the one hand, we see, Azim Premji, for example, starting with a foundation which was operational in nature, as in they were doing the work on the ground.
And they're going to throw us off stage in a second, too.
And then eventually moving to a grant-making, operating model. Whereas in Tata Trust, we see a shift from grant-making to an operating kind of model, structure. What is the kind of thinking behind it? In grant-making, of course, you're making grants to civil society organizations and strengthening the civil society, but when you move to an operational structure, you don't do that. So I was just curious to know what was the kind of thinking behind it.
Great. And then Megha? Yeah.
And of course, my question is in the exact opposite direction, which is slightly higher level, looking at the 2% law and how things have changed in India, and not just with Tata Group, but with lots of these other big corporations. I'm just curious what your perception, having been at Tata for 14 years, has been around the shift in giving, whether you feel like it's improved or whether you think it has not improved.
So grants operation,
Okay.
how the market's been treating some of these changes. And
All right, I'll start with the second question. I don't know the specific answer to your question, but what I can say is that at the Tata Group level, the effort has increased, the dollar amount has increased, and the type of programs that they are engaged in has broadened as well. To the first question, I really don't know.
all right.
I just don't. And Amita was here earlier. So if she's still here, I would recommend you connect with her.
Yeah.
She was on an earlier panel.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, please join me in thanking Mike for taking time out and offering a bit on what Tata's doing in the CSR area here.
And thanking Rick. So, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.